Qwhaxlaxas, the co-sailors. Qhilaghmea, Qwhaxlaxas, the co-sailors. Qhilaghmea, Qhilaghmea, Qwhaxlaxas, My name is Rick Johnson. My traditional name is Qwhaxlaxas. I hold a traditional seat amongst the Qhilaghmea Zawdina. You know, I'm really honored to be here today and, you know, to express our point of view on the extensions of the 5-year extensions and the conditions of the licenses that we've never been consulted with. You know, we've lived in our traditional territory for thousands of years. Our system, our traditional governance system was a system that took care of our most precious resource, our salmon, and our relationship to our salmon, as you just witnessed here today with our song and dance, how connected we are to our salmon. And there's been a great frustration over the years that we've seen the decline of our salmon in our watersheds amongst our Qhilaghmea territory. And we removed 17 fish farms. And the result of that has been the increase of salmon in our territory. I'm a person of the land and water. I was out there the other day, and to see the little fry that are jumping around and ready to go out on their migratory route, that's going to have to go across these licenses that have been extended, right from Doyle Island all the way across to the mainland shores. Our little fry are going to have to fight for their lives again. The precautionary principle isn't being adhered to, and we are really upset over that. And you know, our people were stewards of the land, and we took care of our fish. DFO and along with the government of Canada, you know, there was a mandate made by the Prime Minister himself that by the year 2025, these fish farms would be out of the water. Mm-hmm. You know, we're excited in a way that you know there's a commitment to get them out of the water in 5 years, but our fish cannot survive another 5 years. Mm-hmm. The precautionary principle has to be adhered to, and without consultation with the Qhilaghmea people, it's unfathomable. We need, I guess, between if we're talking reconciliation, there needs to be the fundamental principle has to be respect. You know, what we've been shown is a one-way street. What we've been shown is the power of the Canadian government and the DFO, and that is not acceptable to us. As one of our matriarchs said to me when I used to go and visit her, Ethel Pearson, Qhilaghmea's mother, she said, "Rick, there's going to be a time in the future that I won't be here. You're going to give up the Johnstone Straits without firing a bullet." And we as a collective here have we've gone through the process, and we want to continue that process, and we want to use the courts as a tool to get our point across. But the fight for our wild salmon survival isn't going to stop at the decision of the courts. Mm-hmm. It's fundamental to our survival and our rights and title. Absolutely fundamental. You know, we've lived with fish for 1,000. Our last absolute, our responsibility as chiefs is the protection of wild salmon, and we've known for a long time now that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans mandate is not to protect wild salmon. Mm-hmm. It is there to make sure that the industry can do what they want. You know, you look at the nations that are against fish farms. It's overwhelmingly out of all there's only a handful that want fish farms in the territory, and you know, so I think there's an election coming, mm-hmm. And I think the message has to be out there from all not only First Nations here in BC, but all British Columbians, that wild salmon has to be a priority. Mm-hmm. It has to be an absolute priority in adhering to the precautionary principle, because our people are very concerned. Very concerned. We're here under duress, really. Mm-hmm. We're here under duress, and to show how frustrated we are with the system that we are adhering to. We are adhering to right from the LOU, from the letter of understanding with the BC government, to the transition plan to get the fish farms out of the water by 2025, and not to be consulted around the renewal and around the conditions of the license it does not show any respect to us. So we're here to announce, as Chief Victor Isaac of the Nimgi said, that we're going to court, a judicial review, and we've come a long way to announce this, and our ancestors have to be mentioned here. This fight isn't just a day or two old. This is we've opposed fish farms for well over 30 years, and many of our fighters now are gone. I'd like to mention our chief for many years, Chief Peter Smith, fought against the fish farms, and our chief for many years here, Chief Bob Chamberlain, for the Qhilaghmeas around the Broughton LOU. Bob done a tremendous amount of work for our people, and our people understand that and recognize that. The work that our Wholisgheiss Tribal Council has done over the years, and a lot of our chiefs that aren't here today, we continue the fight. We continue the fight because as Chief Qwhaxlaxas said, our rivers were never meant to be empty, and they were never meant to be not lived beside. We have a special relationship to our salmon, and we will continue that. Our children, we need to save this beautiful resource for our children and our children yet unborn. That is our goal from all our houses of the Qhilaghmeas and the Nimgis, that we continue that fight, and we never ever give it up. And we're disappointed with the 5-year extension of the licenses, and we're disappointed that we haven't even seen the conditions yet without consultation and accommodation. So I'll leave it at that, and Qhilaghmea. Wait.
Hello, I am Wholisgheiss. I come from the Numgis. First off, I want to thank the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish for always having us on their territory when we have business to take care of. I speak for the Numgis, and I also have some freedom to feel I speak for all the salmon people, all up and down the coast, all up and down the Fraser River. As Chief Johnson stated, there's all the nations that support us. And the system that we have makes fighting really difficult. The lack of resources we have makes fighting things really difficult. But when the announcement came out that there was going to be an extension of fish farm licenses for 5 years, the realization hit home that we can't be silent on this. There was just a fraction of a second, a glimmer, because in that announcement the word ban was in there. And I thought, hey, this really means something. I mean, that's a long time, but there's something here. And then reality sunk in, and we realized that this was just a promise. Until it's made a law, it's just a promise. Then they also said that they would revamp the conditions of license. Okay, well that's kind of a good idea. But then we remembered they don't enforce the present conditions of license. So no matter what they do with it, if they're not going to enforce it, it means nothing. You know, for years, industry's been able to police itself, and the new conditions are still able to police themselves. And I don't know anywhere in the world where policing oneself has worked. So, as the Nungies, and also for our brothers and sisters in the Qhilaghmea, we said enough is enough for this. We need to carry on this fight. We need to take them to their courts and show them where they erred. As Chief Isaac and Chief Johnson stated, we were not consulted. We were involved in a process called the transition process. I think it was maybe one of our last meeting, or probably last meeting, they said, well, we're gonna extend licenses by 2 to 6 years. And this was all used. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we can get into in that, but I'm not gonna sway too far. But the point is really specific here. That they did not consult us. We need to rectify that. We need to protect wild salmon, the iconic species. You know, one of the catchphrases in today's world in regard to Indigenous people is reconciliation. And we really have different definitions of that, because for us, reconciliation isn't a gesture. It isn't naming a ferry or a school or a park. Reconciliation is getting back to a place where we once were. In regards to salmon, that's going to be extremely difficult to where we once were, but it can certainly be better. And from our opinion, if we have no salmon, there can't be reconciliation. So I want to thank you all for being here. You know, we need to get this message across that's been stated. We need all British Columbians, all Canadians to stand up and say enough is enough. You know, the head man in this country said that we'd move the farms out. There's been no work done in the past 5 years, and I'm like I said, promises have not been good for us, so we have to take this step. So thank you all, and I want to introduce Qhilaghmea to share some words and some of his knowledge. Qhilaghmea.
I'm happy to see that I wasn't the only one that didn't get the email about the regalia. I want to thank Chief Isaac and Wholisgheiss for inviting me to speak today. This is not a surprise that the Nungies and the Qwhaxlaxas First Nation find themselves in courts yet again to protect the wild salmon. I was invited to the announcement when the 5-year licenses were renewed, and I stated then that the devil would be in the details, the conditions of license in the new regulations. Today shows you that the devil is in those details. The devil is in those conditions of licenses. If there has been any stronger or strengthening of these regulations, it's minuscule. Minuscule at best for the convenience of industry. Now, when we talk about the regulations, it gets very complicated very quickly. But I can tell you, when the regulation goes from a 3 sea lice average down to 2.8, it's a joke. Because we're talking about 1 million fish on every farm. So now instead of 3 million sea lice producing larvae to kill our fish, there's only 2.8 million. And then you multiply that times the operational farms. We did some great work in the Broughton. We got rid of the farms there with the provincial government. Implemented the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People for the first time in Canadian history. The problem is with these licenses being renewed north of the Broughton, across from Port Hardy, that's another bottleneck that is going to kill our fish. And so to make this as plain as possible for the average Canadian to understand, picture a bonfire and you're trying to pump gas through it. How well are you going to do with that? That's what our fish face. You know, the government gives lip service to reconciliation all the time. They give lip service to traditional Indigenous ecological knowledge. Well, I'll tell you one thing I understand. Fish don't buck the tide until they go back to the river to spawn. And until then, the tide drives them right to the fish farms, right to this narrow channels where the larvae and the disease and pathogens are. We've done a lot of work as the Wild Salmon Alliance identified 120 First Nations across the province that support the transition of fish farms from the ocean. And I've spoken to those leaders myself, as I was the one that sought them out and explained the situation. And to know that the position that's taken is based upon federal court outcomes, it's based upon the Auditor General's reports, it's based upon the Chief Scientist report of Canada, it's from the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. So we're talking about outcomes of process and fact. And so this is why we stand up. You saw today my family here with our regalia on. This is who we are. And there are Qhilaghmea chiefs here that have fulfilled their obligations culturally, where they've hosted our people and fed them fish, salmon. It is who we are. And this is replicated wherever there is a watershed that has salmon across this province. And so we have two First Nations that have stood up, supported by the many. We have Qhilaghmea First Nation here. I know for a fact that the Statlian Chiefs Council are happy this is occurring, and the Qhilaghmea, and the Stalo. This is something that is supported across the province. And what we need to do, as this court action demonstrates, is the Crown has some obligations that it has conveniently chosen to forget, and that's consultation. Consultation cannot be a coffee, a donut, and gee, I'm glad you came, but here's what we're going to do anyway. Those days are long gone. And that's from the Supreme Court. It's from the commitments on reconciliation, commitments on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We're talking food security across the province of British Columbia. But the beautiful thing about protecting salmon is it's not just a First Nation issue. Sport fishermen, commercial fishermen, wilderness tourism operators, don't forget the bears, eagles, and wolves. Appropriate steps to protect wild salmon is good for First Nations, reconciliation, food security, the economy, the environment. Why are we even having this discussion anymore? It's because the DFO has simply lost its way. It undermines the minister, it undermines this government by its actions. And that is why they are currently under investigation by the public sector commissioner. And that to me says a lot. And we can get into great detail and many examples, and we can give you names of all the problems inside DFO. But we want the Crown to live up to its obligations. Qhilaghmea.
This could be for Chief Isaac or whoever feels most comfortable. I'd like to know if the provided any justifications for these renewals in explaining this decision to renew these licenses?
Simple answer, no. They've not consulted us on anything in regards to this, so that's why we're here today to announce our legal case against this. Thank you.
So this essentially blindsided you. Would that be an accurate characterization? I'm sorry to keep coming up with that.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Yeah, you know, we were all optimistic. 2025 was rolling around. We were excited that these were finally going to be out of the water, and all of a sudden we get punched to the side, and it was like, holy smokes, these guys are going against what the government has said, get them out of the water, and then they're making a decision. You know, and we're totally against it for sure. You know, we didn't expect it. Like I said, everybody was rejoicing that we could get them out of the water. But now the tables have turned on us again, so we're going to fight it.
In 2009, the federal government was given direction by the courts to regain control over fish farms and regulations. Because at that time it was being overseen by the province. And so the federal government had to develop new regulations and new management practices. They had to consult with First Nations. I was part of that with the Fisheries Council. And so here we have an announcement for 5 years. And oh, by the way, we have new regulations and conditions of license. This is what I mean by them conveniently forgetting the honor of the Crown. There's no difference between 2009 and 2024. They have an obligation to consult and accommodate, and they didn't do it. And they know. And so what we see is a federal department, the public service, working against the government's commitments on the UN Declaration, working against the government's commitments to reconciliation, and working against the human rights of First Nations people across this province. That's what's at stake here. And I wish the public sector investigation well in the work, because there's plenty of rocks to turn over in DFO, and plenty of people to be held accountable.
What about the companies themselves? Have they been silent? Have they provided any kind of reassurance?
Yeah, they said, don't worry, we got this. Industry, you have to understand, and this is, you know, you have to, when you start to dive into all the details and start connecting all the dots, you get offended, you get angry. DFO is telling you that there's no worries. There's no more than minimal risk to salmon from disease and pathogens and sea lice. And you're supposed to believe that until you look at the process that gave them those outcomes. And that's the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat. Well, lo and behold, Fish Farm Company 1 is the proponent bringing science there. Industry is represented. Stakeholders are represented. So that's Fish Farm Company 1, Fish Farm Company 2, 3, and 4, and their industry associations. They sit beside DFO Aquaculture and DFO Aquaculture Science with a mandate to promote and expand the industry. They set the terms of reference, they decide who else is involved, they decide who does the science review, and they decide what the outcome is. What do you think the outcome's been?
Yes.
It's like asking a room full of Montreal Canadian fans if they think Montreal's the best team on the planet. You're gonna get one answer. But that's what DFO stands on. And this isn't my opinion. This is me sharing with you facts. And this was testified by people that were in the CSAS process that stated at the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, the outcome does not reflect current state of science. And that's what we're facing, is we've got a rogue department that is undermining this government. And I urge the Prime Minister and all the other ministers that have stood for wild salmon to check out, see what's going on, because there's a lot, and it's wrong. And our language eats the cut, it's just not right.
Hello, it's Ben Mildred with CTV. I'm not sure who wants to handle this, maybe more than one of you. It seems that the feds and the industry are happy to pit First Nation against First Nation while business continues on as status quo. Have you guys had any talks with those nations that do host the fish farms and try to come to some kind of terms with them on phasing out those farms?
Short answer is no, but it's not simply not that there's not a desire to. There's it's a pretty complicated issue, and the nations that are involved in fish farming are I guess it is a critical part of their economy, and they believe in DFO. This isn't an issue, and as Bob mentioned, it's quite maddening at times to imagine. You've all seen the pictures of the little smolts with 10 lice on them, and still DFO is saying that these are it's not harmful. What is happening to these fish? There's nothing happening to these fish. Certainly from the nummies perspective, we're going to engage, and there's other things to engage some of these nations with, and we need to talk about that. At this point, there's kind of, I don't know, it's almost a not really talking about it thing, I guess, but it's one of those things where we have to have that conversation, and our positions are well known, but I mean, it might be coming from a cultural point where there might be some movement. I think that, within these nations, certainly, I'll speak of the Qwhaxlaxas. Many of us are part Qwhaxlaxas. We're part Qwhaxlaxas, and there are many relatives there. And sometimes the decisions aren't always what the membership wants, is what we've heard. So the short answer is that we haven't had a whole lot of conversations, but we certainly want to have these conversations and see if we can, sort out some of the issues. But the priority for us, and it should be for everybody, is wild salmon. We had a meeting of several nations about probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago. The Numgies were there, the Mamalilokla, the Qwhaxlaxas, the Tanakdak, several other nations, and there was one that chief simply asked the question, what are wild salmon worth? And we can't put a value on that. So we'll continue this, and we will have these conversations, and hopefully they can be fruitful, but we'll try everything to save wild salmon. Thank you.
The question about division amongst First Nations on this topic, there isn't. There isn't. Industry and their supporters want you to believe that. Industry and their supporters want you to believe that we're a bunch of radicals, that we are creating a division. We've identified 120 out of 205 First Nations that support this. That's not division. That's unity. When a small sliver of 10 to 12 First Nations stand beside 120, where's the division? We have unity on this subject across the province. And I listened to the federal ministers when they made their announcements reference that. They understand that very clearly. It's a province-wide issue, but it's happening in very local places. But the impact is felt by the carrier people, by the Nisga'a people, by the Qhilaghmea, Qhilaghmea, Qwhaxlaxas, the Stalo, for the benefit of a very small number of First Nations.
My second question then has to do with land-based aquaculture. aquaculture, which I understand Numgees is participating in land-based aquaculture. We've heard from the industry and from the First Nations leaders in the areas that do support fish farms that is prohibitively expensive and will kill their business. I'm just wondering whether somebody can step forward and talk about the benefits of land-based aquaculture and how that's working out for the Numgees.
Well, thank you, Ben. I was just at Qhilaghmea yesterday. I did a tour there with Lisa Marie Baron and a young lady from the National Observer. I don't remember her last name. First name was Hope. And the reason we were there was I wanted to show them that this is how a land-based fish farm works. These guys at Qhilaghmea not only make a good product, they're actually doing steelhead now because they couldn't access any Atlantic smolts. It runs like clockwork. Can't deny it'll be expensive. You know, it will be. But it's not doable. It's absolutely doable. There are more and more land-based fish farms coming up all over the world. There's a couple now that are turning profit. You know, you kind of hear, the big one in Florida. I had lots of trouble, and I think they're turning out some product now. And well, I believe the money they've invested, they're not giving up. And the technology's there. One of the things that the general manager Qhilaghmea said yesterday when we were talking was, he said, we got really good at farming Atlantic salmon. And then there was no more Atlantic salmon available, so they've gone to move to steelhead. But the process is really similar. There's a few differences. It's a doable thing. I mean, I think the biggest issue is with some of these other ones is getting too big too fast. I think you got to stage your growth, get to a point where you're start off, I don't know, with 1,000 tons or something like that. You can make some money and then grow from there. You know, the idea that we need to duplicate what's happening in the open ocean is crazy. You know, why do we have to do that? I mean, I'll just tell you, I'm in favor of sending the industry home and let Canadians do this work if they want to do that. And let's keep all the money in Canada. If we look at the benefit of building the infrastructure of these systems, it's a win-win. No lice, no disease. It's a win-win. It's absolutely doable, and not without challenges certainly, but it's doable. I mean, I ain't a rich man, but if you know a sure thing, let me know. I might invest in that. You know. So, but all the benefits, they far outweigh it, and it's doable. I can't say that enough times. It's absolutely doable. And you're welcome. You're all welcome. I can arrange a date where you can come up and look at it and have a chat with the people that run it and get the information right from them.
Thank you. Just those couple of questions there. Just wanted to add the Qhilaghmea product was highly sought after by restaurants, high-end restaurants, because of the quality of those fish that were coming out of that as well. You know, the texture was stronger. You know, it's a much better fish for the chefs to work with. You know, and they just loved that fish. So they were always asking us for any product that we had available. So, you know, on a larger scale, you know, that business would have done better. We were told, but, you know, like Don said, it's got to be growing, you know, slowly out and understand it better. They ironed it out. They worked it out really good. On the other question in regards to division, you know, there's some First Nations that are really remote, and I think industry is taking advantage of that. You know, they come into your area and they make promises, you know, to give you dollars to set up in their camp, their territories, and you know that's what it is. You know, and it's wrong. You know, taking advantage and trying to pit us against one another. But you talk to the people on those reserves that are against fish farms. You know, probably the majority are against them. But you know, the dollar is there, and that's the carrot. So when I had that, thanks.
The land-based closed containment, there is an industry publication called Intrafish. And I took a screen capture because they started a monthly newsletter on the fastest growing sector globally for aquaculture. And it was RAS, which is land-based close containment. And so when the industry here tells you that it's impossible, they're lying, they're misleading, because they want to maintain their profit levels at the external cost to the environment and to our people's rights. That's what they want to maintain. And it doesn't necessarily need to be Atlantic salmon. There are a lot of things you can grow in land-based close containment. And I know there's First Nations across the province that are interested in doing that. But the government is deaf to those opportunities. They're deaf to the opportunity of employment across the province for First Nations. But they just prop up this one industry that is really not beneficial on the bigger scale of things. Now, in the near future, you're going to hear the government come forward and talk about ocean-based closed containment. It's a farce. It's a sieve in the ocean. We examined semi-enclosed fish farms when we did the Broughton and outright rejected them, without question. No filtration of disease and pathogens. This is a primary concern. Cohen said that there's potentially irreversible harm to wild salmon. That begs the precautionary principle. So I think we need to make sure that Canadians understand that semi-enclosed, it's not a solution. It's another distraction that they want to do so they can continue to make profits at the expense of our fish, our wild fish, and our environment.
So the old adage is that a compromise is a solution when no one is happy. Obviously, the Finfish Stewardship Group isn't happy about this 5-year closure, and your group is not happy that it is taking 5 years. Could you say for me why you think that this isn't an effective compromise, why this isn't going to get done what you believe needs to get done on salmon farming?
Everybody wants a shot at this one. The real simple thing is our historic knowledge of DFO, how they handle and I'll call it complicit behavior with industry. They I've lost my train of thought there. Okay. So in regards to the announcement, like I stated earlier, at this point, it's a promise. It's a promise. Until that becomes legislated, it's a promise. And I'll say it again, we haven't done good with promises. We talk about the conditions of license and said, okay, we're going to make these better. And marginal at best. You know, I think I answered this question earlier. The fact that they don't enforce it. You guys all have a look and see how many times the industry has been charged with something. I don't think they've ever been charged with anything. Partially because they police themselves, I guess. You know? And these are still the things that are there. There's nothing really changed when they made this announcement. So I don't even see it as a compromise. So yeah, I think it's that simple. It's not even a compromise because there's virtually nothing has changed. You know, there's some words that have changed, but there's nothing cast in stone or anything.
So is it fair to say that as a group you believe that this is just another promise and not a real commitment to end fish farming in 2029?
History tells us that.
Thank you.
During the Open EPAN transition planning process, I know that the Statley and the Stalo, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, the Hawalpo First Nation, all put in on the record in that consultation supporting a Broughton-style transition, which means the sequential removal of farms over a period of time. We didn't see that in this 5-year plan. They just said that you're allowed to operate for 5 years. So the concern is they're going to plug every farm full for 5 years and amplify what's already impacting beleaguered salmon runs across BC. And you have to get violently curious or morbidly fascinated with just to understand everything. Because you look at the judicial review ruling that just came out on Discovery Islands, where the judge, the federal court, stated the minister was within her realm of responsibility to implement the precautionary principle because of the lack of concise science, and not issue Discovery Islands fish farm licenses. So the federal court has spoken yet again. But interestingly, when you read the ruling from the judge, it states that DFO has one manner to apply the precautionary principle. One manner, and that's it, because they don't have science to apply it differently. So then that begs the question, why are we got fish farms in the North Island on the same old migration route, doing the very same thing that Discovery Islands was shut down for? This is where like common sense and logic gets lost within a department that's beholden to an industry. But the impacts of the fish farms in the very north end of the island in the Queen Charlotte Sound impact Fraser River, the Broughton First Nation, the Numgees River. And so this is why nations stand up and go to court again and again, is to hold the government accountable and to connect the dots for the courts to rule on, because we don't get the honor of the crown actioned when we engage. And I want to apologize to Edgar and Eli for mentioning Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, Chief Rick Johnson here. Also, what we've come to understand, you know, just from their history, Department of Fisheries and Oceans isn't there for wild salmon. They're there to make sure industry gets what they want. And if we're going to take the example of the closure of the Discovery Islands and the 17 fish farms removed from the Broughton, and go up and all of us here have a look at what's happening in the Broughton, you see every flood tide and every ebb tide, our territory is getting cleaner. Whales are coming back that have never been there in 25 years. We're seeing orca whales coming back in. We're seeing salmon jump. We're seeing our Winnipegs getting healthier. Our territory is getting healthier. So it doesn't make any sense to us that the department, who's supposed to have the mandate to protect wild salmon, is extending another 5 years. And it doesn't make any sense to us that they wouldn't sit down with us to discuss the conditions of those licenses. So, you know, we have little or no faith in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We know who they are, you know, so, you know, the salmon farms have to be closed down. It's in the interest of all the First Nations, most of the First Nations, and British Columbians. The nations that want fish farms in their territory are there for short economic gains, and I don't blame them. Considering that the state of how our First Nations are in around how much money's been invested in our quality of life, so that, you know, we want to close the socioeconomic gap. You come to our reserve of the Qhilaghmea. It's, you know, you go back 100 years. It's the infrastructure's no good. We've got water that's got arsenic in it. You know, it's terrible, absolutely terrible how our nations are surviving. So, you know, if a big corporation comes and offers money, it's under duress that a lot of our nations are saying, okay, well, you know what, I can buy a loaf of bread now. You know, I can buy that $1,500 car that I couldn't afford last year. You know, I can go and buy a carton of smokes, rather than asking my uncle next door for some tobacco. Those are the realities of our First Nations on reserves. So industry takes advantage of that, and you know. But the problem being when when the nations that are there for short economic gains are affecting our fish that we're working hard, really hard to save. As I said earlier in my opening comments, that we see the fry jumping around all our bays. They're healthy, beautiful little fry that are going to have to run that gauntlet. You know, they're going to have to run that gauntlet, and unfortunately, with the extension of the licenses and us not knowing the conditions, the mortality rate is going to be high. And you know, the DFO is not there to save wild salmon. We are working on our watersheds ourselves, with no resourcing from the federal government or DFO. You know, we're restoring one of our watersheds called Meetup of Viner Sound under our own dime, and we don't have much money. You know, it's a lot of sweat equity. A lot of people who really care about salmon are putting the time and effort in to save the salmon in the Broughton. You know, I guess there's a wild salmon policy that we all hear about. It's like a Cadillac that's in the garage with no gas. You know, it's apparently it's there. Yeah, we haven't seen it, you know, but we're going to continue. DFO just got to get out of our way. You know, DFO has to stand aside and really acknowledge what they're here for. They're there to assist industry, not the wild salmon. Qhilaghmea.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
This is really entirely procedural. What's the next step? Like, when do they have to the DFO have to answer you? Like, this very basic question, but I'm just wondering when can you expect an answer from them?
Well, I'm gonna ask the gentleman behind me to answer that.
Sean?
The next step in the process will be for DFO to produce the decision record. So the next step in the process before the courts will be for DFO to produce what's called the certified tribunal record, which is the record of the materials before the minister when she made the decision to reissue the licenses. At that point in time, these nations will then have the evidence that was before the minister when she made that decision, something that they've not seen up until this point.
That was Sean Jones, Lumber's lawyer.
Sean Jones, legal counsel for Numgis First Nation.
Okay, I think we can wrap up.
Thank you all for coming, and feel free, like I say, the invitation's there to come and have a look at Qterra, see for yourselves what's going on, talk to the people that are operating it. And any other questions, we're happy to answer anytime.